Hello and welcome to Literary Morning, a cozy bookish podcast to listen to while you sip your morning cup of tea. I'm Hannah, a stay-at-home mom of two who loves to read and talk about books, and I'm so glad you're here. I am not someone who typically struggles with buying too many books at one time. I don't go to the bookstore super often, or at least not as often as I would love to, and when I do go, I tend to limit myself to one or two books, because having a huge physical TBR is very intimidating, and I also don't like to spend a lot of money at one time. But with Christmas and the New Year, I did find myself acquiring a few books that I am very excited to talk about, so I wanted to do a little book haul episode. These sort of episodes are probably not going to be very common on this podcast. I may not have another one until this time next year when I'll have another huge influx of books, but I love to watch other people's book hauls on YouTube and Instagram. It's interesting to see what books people are excited about, what books they may be reading soon, so I can keep an eye out for their reviews. I would also love to hear from you guys on the books that I got, which ones I should prioritize soon, which ones you'll want to be reading soon. So with all that being said, let's get into the books I have added to my shelves. I have the full stack in front of me, so if you hear any book noises, book ASMR in the background, just know that I am holding up the books even though you can't see them. The first book I got is Don't Waste Your Life by John Piper. My family typically does a book exchange either for Thanksgiving or Christmas, where we draw names for everyone in my family, for my siblings and my in-laws. So my brother-in-law got me this year, and this is the book he got me. I don't know much about it. I don't even think I've read any John Piper books off the top of my head. It says, "The American dream beckons us to spend our lives on trivial diversions, slipping through life caught up with seeking earthly success, comfort, and pleasure above all else. But God designed us for far more than this." John Piper makes a passionate plea to Christians to avoid the dangers of a wasted life, calling us to take risks and make sacrifices that matter for eternity. So this is a very short book. It seems only like maybe 200 pages. I'm always looking for good Christian nonfiction books to read along with my Bible time, so this one will definitely be added to my list. My brother-in-law, when he gave this to me, said that he hasn't actually finished it yet, so he didn't know if he fully liked it, but he passed it on to me, so I will definitely be reading this one very soon. The next book is a book that my sister-in-law actually got for my husband in the book exchange, but this is probably one that I will eventually read myself, so I wanted to go ahead and talk about it, and it is Nightbooks by J.A. White. I've truly never heard of this book, don't know anything about it, but it seems like it is a middle grade book. Again, very short. So the synopsis says, "Alex loved scary stories his whole life. Now he's trapped in one. After Alex sneaks out in the middle of the night, he becomes imprisoned by the witch Natasha in her magical apartment. Another child in the apartment, Yasmin, assures Alex that she's already tried every means of escape. Only Natasha holds the bone keys that lead back to their world, and she'll never part from them." This is also apparently a Netflix movie that I've also never heard of, never seen on Netflix, so if you've heard of this or watched the movie, let me know. I think it may be part of a series, too. I'm not sure. You'll notice that with a lot of my book hauls, I don't know a lot about the books that I get. When I pick up books, I sort of like to know a vague sense of what they're about, like get the vibe for what they're about, but I like to go in mostly blind when I read a book. So some of these books are harder to talk about than others, but this one is one that I've heard a lot about, so I feel like I do know what it's about, and that is The Stand by Stephen King. This is a book that was on my 5-star predictions for 2025 in the last episode, so I finally got myself a copy. In The Stand, Stephen King explores the post-apocalyptic world after it is devastated by a plague that kills most of civilization, and the communities that arise from that catastrophe. I know around COVID time, a lot of people were talking about this book and how it would be very scary to read under the context of living through an actual pandemic, much like the pandemic in this book. A patient escapes from a biological testing facility unknowingly carrying a deadly weapon, a mutated strain of superflu that will wipe out 99% of the world's population within a few weeks. Those who remain are scared, bewildered, and in need of a leader. Two emerge: Mother Abigail, the benevolent 108-year-old woman who urges them to build a peaceful community in Boulder, Colorado, and Randall Flagg, the nefarious dark man who delights in chaos and violence. As the dark man and the peaceful woman gather power, the survivors will have to choose between them and ultimately decide the fate of all humanity. As I said in my 5-star predictions, I think this could be maybe my new favorite Stephen King book. I don't know. I've heard that this is one of his scariest books. I've heard that it has one of the best villains people have ever read. So I am very hyped. I have super high expectations for this. It's also very long, so I don't know when I will get to it, but I definitely want to get to it as soon as possible this year. And that is The Stand by Stephen King. The next book is truly a random book that I picked up when I went to the bookstore on New Year's Day, and that is The Plantagenets, The Warrior Kings and Queens Who Made England by Dan Jones. I saw this book at the bookstore maybe around a year ago when I was browsing once, and I put it on my Goodreads TBR, and every time I've gone to the bookstore since, I've looked at it and I'm like, that sounds like something I will love, but I've never pushed myself to buy it until this time, and I'm so excited for it. It's a historical nonfiction book about the Plantagenets and their history, how they built England. This is an era of history that I am so interested in, but honestly don't know as much as I would like to know, so I'm very excited to read this. I've also heard great things about Dan Jones as a nonfiction author. Even the back says, the first Plantagenet kings inherited a blood-soaked realm from the Normans and transformed it into an empire that stretched at its peak from Scotland to Jerusalem. In this epic narrative history of courage, treachery, ambition, and deception, Dan Jones resurrects the unruly royal dynasty that preceded the Tudors. They produced England's best and worst kings, Henry II and his wife Eleanor of Aquitaine, twice a queen and the most famous woman in Christendom, their son Richard the Lionheart, who fought Saladin in the Third Crusade, and his conniving brother King John, who's forced to grant his people new rights under the Magna Carta. Jones reveals how the maligned kings Edward II and Richard II met their downfalls. This is the era of chivalry and the Black Death, the Knights Templar, the founding of Parliament, and the 100 Years' War, when England's national identity was forged by the sword. There are so many buzzwords in that description that get me so excited, narrative, history, Eleanor of Aquitaine, the Black Death, so many things that I'm so excited to read more about. Again, I don't know when I will get to this, but it is high on my priority list because I am in such a history nonfiction mood right now, so I'm hoping to take advantage of that and read something like this very soon. Next, from my parents, I got the entire series of Little House on the Prairie. I've obviously read Little House on the Prairie a couple times, once when I was little, and I read them again a few years ago, but I've not owned the whole series myself. This is a series I put on my list more in anticipation of reading them to my own children very soon. My oldest daughter is almost 2, so she's still a little too young to fully appreciate these books, but I want to start building my collection for her and my youngest, just so that when they do get to a point that they are interested in reading, or I'm interested in reading more to them, besides the picture books that we currently read every day, I just want to have a well-curated library of children's books for them at their disposal. So these aren't really books I'm planning to reread anytime soon, but I did get them and they're on my shelves now, which I'm very happy with. Similarly to that, I have a few other children's classics that I got to add to my shelf. These are beautiful vintage editions that my dear friend Abby got me for Christmas, and she got me 3 of these children's classics. There's Alice in Wonderland, Black Beauty, and Robin Hood, and I actually don't have any of these already, which is kind of crazy. I've not actually read Alice in Wonderland. Alice in Wonderland is one of those books that I feel like I've read, but I've not actually read. I just know those stories so well from watching the movies. I was in a play back in middle school of Alice in Wonderland, and I've listened to bits and pieces of the book, but I've not actually sat down and read it all the way through. So I'm excited about that one. Black Beauty is one that I love the movie for, but never read the book. And similarly with Robin Hood, I have not read that one. So these are very nice additions to have for my children's bookshelf, and maybe I'll even read them very soon. So those are all the books I have acquired recently. I know it's not the craziest book haul, it's kind of random, but they're all books that I'm very excited for and very grateful to have on my shelves. Let me know any books you've hauled recently that you're excited about. Have you read any of these books? Which ones should I prioritize? Let me know. I would love to hear it. Thank you so much for listening and spending time with me today. You can connect with me and follow the show at Literary Morning on Instagram for all the latest news and updates. Show notes for this episode and more can be found at literarymorning.com. Did you love this episode? Be sure to leave a 5-star review or share it with a friend. Your love and support means the world. I hope you have a wonderful morning, afternoon, or evening whenever you're listening, and I'll talk to you again very soon.